Hello, and welcome to Product Market Fit, a show all about technology, startups, and growth. I'm your host, Moshe Polterak, and I'm super excited to be here today with Canon Reeves, CTO and co-founder of Pipedream Labs. This is actually our first in-person interview done on the podcast, so it's going to be a little bit different, and I'm really excited about it. The technology that this company is building is super visionary and futuristic, and you'll see in a second why I am as excited about it as I think you will be. So without further ado, we have Canon here. Let's talk about Pipedream. What is it? Can you tell us what you're building?
Yeah, Pipedream is one of those fun companies to pitch because every 60-second pitch you give breeds more questions. But basically, we are building the future of hyperlogistics. And the way we define that is an end state where you can send and receive any items in single-digit minutes from your home. It's sort of this idea of like ultimate convenience. To achieve that and build that, we are building underground delivery robots. And so basically, we have taken standard utility pipes and retrofitted them with rails and robots that allow us to do like completely invisible, high speed and low cost delivery in cities of any scale.
Fascinating. So robots delivering things underground in pipes, hence the name, right? Talk to me about how logistics, the logistics landscape and where you guys fit in, right? We know first mile, and then you have the entire delivery system, and then you have last mile. Where does Pipedream fit in?
Pretty firmly in the last mile. So where we do well, we don't compete well with like semi-trucks because semi-trucks are super efficient per package. The cost of that truck and that delivery is pretty low because they can fill so many of them in there. Where delivery really breaks down is the last mile because you have one person carrying one package or one burrito in kind of like a DoorDash type example. So that's really where we shine is things that are like one driver to a few packages.
Okay. So delivering, the end state would be delivering things directly into people's homes, right? That's the vision?
Yeah, that's the dream.
And that's how far out?
Closer than people think. It's really easy to build this system in when you're doing a new build community or a new apartment complex. And so what I suspect is in the next 3 years, we'll be doing actual delivery into homes. It will take a long time to scale that. Obviously, you're not going to go retrofit into a single family home. That looks a little bit different. But there definitely will be like new builds that have this system because it's really like an incremental cost to the developer to add this in, and it's a great new and very unique amenity.
Got it. You mentioned the cost of the developer. This is, I'm assuming, high CapEx type investment whenever you're laying pipes underground, you're building robots. In this model, when you're delivering to consumers, who's paying for the service? What's your business model?
It looks a few different ways depending on the install type. Because at the end of the day, this is utility. I don't know in the end state if we want to be the ones owning the pipes necessarily. We definitely want to tie sort of our business to the incremental deliveries that the robots do. Sort of like just making a couple pennies here or there every time a robot makes the delivery. In terms of pipe ownership, it can go a number of different ways, whether the developer owns that or if a utility company wants to come in and lay all that pipe, they could own that and do like a leasing model. It looks a few different ways, but at the end of the day, we make money when we do more deliveries. However, that actual fine details pan out.
Got it. In the use case of laying the pipes with a new development complex or new home builders, are they incentivized to do it as kind of a amenity for tenants, for home buyers?
Yeah, it doesn't really cost the cost. It doesn't increase the cost per home very substantially, under 10K per home. And they're already laying all these other utilities. And so basically they can, while they're like trenching for these other things, just make the trench a little bit bigger and include our pipes. And a lot of the cost just comes from the portal hardware that'll come down over time.
Mm-hmm. You had a tweet thread a while back and you described kind of the nuance of your delivery network versus utilities, because utilities are one to many, right? You have the water plant or the electric generation, happening elsewhere, and it's being distributed all over to the end users. You guys are going to be multi-user on the front end as well, right? Because Amazon and Wendy's and whoever wants to deliver things to many houses, so it's many to many, right? How does that change the design of this?
Yeah, it makes bootstrapping the network much harder.
Yeah,
because you have way more parties. So if you think about it in terms of just stakeholders to make something like this happen, the very first is the city, right? They're more of a gatekeeper than a stakeholder. That we never anticipate the cities to be paying for this. They have enough other things that they need to be focused on, that this is really something they just need a permit. So this the city's allowing us to do the right of way. You have the supply side users, which are your Walmarts, your Amazons, your food, DoorDash, UPS, those players. And then you have kind of the end destinations, the final nodes. And when you think about building a network in a city, the beautiful thing about our product in our system is that as more of those players get added on, the value of that network increases. So it becomes more and more enticing to plug into that, especially if you're on the demand side, like a developer. But yeah, it basically means that you have to create, or our strategy has been, we have to create products that are valuable to those parties independent of the full network. So the Wendy's example, we want Wendy's to be able to send your order directly into your home. That's the end goal. But it would take forever to get there. And if you try to do just that from the beginning, I don't think it would work. What we've done is instead say, let's chop up our product and offer a version that's kind of like a bank tube for foods. We call it First Inch, where you're going from the back of store in a Wendy's to the parking lot to do pickup. So they're already doing like mobile pickup for people using their app and DoorDash drivers. And we can take that and make that process more efficient, pull people out of the drive-thru so they can fit more people through. And just build a better customer experience. It's kind of like digitally first. It's kind of like a self-checkout for fast food. But by building this product, if that can be independently useful and scalable, the scope of that network is just that parking lot. And so you can go do that everywhere. And that can be a product that like makes its own money and like scales on its own. And then later on, as you start to get more developers in larger city installs planned, you can connect up these existing supply side nodes because you're already providing value to them and already installed.
That's a really interesting way to break out your rollout strategy so that you can deliver value along the way. And congratulations on that deal with Wendy's. That's massive. How did you land that deal before we get into the specifics of some of the other parts of what you mentioned? But I'm really curious about, startup, you don't have any revenue yet. I'm assuming this is your first revenue generating deal. How did you go about doing it?
Yeah, we've had people ask us like, who did you know there? And I wish we knew somebody there. No, we didn't. We just cold emailed and got in touch with their innovation team. Their innovation team is amazing. And really everybody across that org, we have worked so deeply with them across every function of the product, and everybody there is amazing. So we honestly got really lucky to have them as a first customer. They've really helped us iron out a lot of the details. I'm a big fan of like building with your customers. Like if we'd gone in and said, we're going to tell you what you want, I don't think it would have worked well for anybody. But we went into them, shared the same vision, and collaborated together to make the best product possible for them.
Cool. So how do you structure a deal like that? Is it sort of, we'll figure it out as we go along? Do you have end state goals that you're working towards in order, with milestones? How do you structure something like that?
Yeah, this is definitely a pilot. All of us are really aligned that this is kind of a test. The hope and the goal is that we then go do more locations, and everything we're doing is sort of with that lens of like, we know internally what we want to hit and what we want to see. And at the end of the day, it's increasing revenue for them is the goal. But yeah, like assuming things go well, we'll want to turn around and do more. But there's a lot of things between now and then.
Right. So the pilot starts with how many locations, and when are you going to be live?
It starts with one. It goes live at the end of the year.
Fantastic. Okay. And then hopefully that's successful. Then they're going to expand it geographically to more and more locations.
Yeah. That's the dream.
I'm a customer. I come to Wendy's instead of a drive-through. It's more of like a kind of pickup locker sort of thing. Is that how if I wanted to envision it?
Yeah. There's a few different versions or like use cases that you would have with it. But let's say like you're a customer and you order on your phone ahead, which is like, in my mind, it's like a faster and better experience. And so basically right now, if you do that though, you have to either walk into the store and find your order or go through the drive-thru, which at that point, just order on the drive-thru. So there's some friction in that experience. And so with our product, basically you place your order, you come in, you pull into any of the portals. There's a number of them there, kind of like a Sonic drive-thru. You pull in, you scan a QR code on the screen, and your order gets sent to you. In like 30 seconds to a minute, your food is there. The door like magically opens, and this kind of mechanism comes out to hand you your food. And like we really want to make it just this like unique and magical experience. That's just something nobody's ever seen before. But then you get your food and you go. And you don't have to talk to people. You don't have to like wait in line and keep moving up. Like you can just sit there, play on your phone, and get your food delivered right to you.
Yeah. So part of me, I've never been to a Sonic. How is it different from a Sonic? Do they have like pneumatic tubes that they're using?
Oh, they have people that bring the food out to you. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. But since I brought up the pneumatic tubes, we've all seen them either at a bank or, sometimes Costco will have them shuttling these cash tubes across from different cashier stations. Is this system built to model off of that? Like, how's that different? Do you think about that system?
Yeah. So kind of where it differs, The pneumatic systems don't maintain the orientation of that tube. So when it goes vertical, it goes straight vertical. When it goes horizontal, it goes straight horizontal. And if you imagine like your food order being twisted and turned like that, it doesn't really work. There's also fundamental differences in like what, like in how big you can make that pipe because it's pneumatic. And then there's also like worrying about sealing things. So our strategy is totally different than pneumatic. Basically what we do is we have this standard rail that we lay throughout the pipe. The robot drives on that, and then there's kind of like a small elevator that comes down and grabs the order out. So the robots always stay in the same plane, and then a separate robot, as you could think of it, lifts that tote out and moves it around. So it kind of gives you, like, to put it more precisely, it gives you a lot more flexibility with how you construct networks and how you like install this and where it goes.
Right. I'd imagine with the way pneumatic tubes work with creating those vacuums, it's pretty limited in what you can do.
Yeah. Especially distances, right? And so kind of the cool thing about our product that is sometimes surprising to people is that product that we're doing for Wendy's, which is just in a parking lot, is the same exact one we're doing at our pilot just outside of Atlanta that's like a mile long. So none of the tech changes. It's all completely modular and all interfaces with each other. It doesn't work that well when you scale that to pneumatic.
Right. Okay. So it's an underground tube. You've got tracks inside the tube. You've got a robot that's going on those tracks, and then you've got robotic, call them lifts. You said elevators?
Yeah, so we call them portals.
Okay, portals. Yeah. That'll grab the cart or the robot off of the tracks to that last access point.
Yeah, so it grabs to be more specific too, it grabs like a tote, like just a plastic tote that holds your order. And then one of the cool things we can do is like we can store orders above ground in kind of an air conditioned area. So if like that order gets done before you're there, we can kind of have that cached. But yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So talk to me about that. You mentioned the Atlanta pilot. What's the use case there?
Yeah. So this was sort of the first build out we've done. We really wanted to validate a few things. One, validate the tech, but two, validate that we can work with cities and get this permitted because we had no idea how they would react to this. And it turns out they are super friendly to this. We're just installing pipes that they're very familiar with. We're not, it's not under pressure. There's not really a lot of risk associated with it. And so it was pretty easy to permit it. It took like 2 weeks to permit this one. But it's a 3/4 mile track going from a retail center we have inside of a strip mall all the way to an office building. And so it goes directly inside the office building. And that office building, it also like, the cool thing about the robot is it can go in pipes, but it can also go in this overhead ducting that we've created. So it goes into the basement of this building, into this ducting, and then drives throughout the building to a portal.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
So what's the consumer response been so far? There's a novelty aspect to it, but beyond that, where's the utility that they're seeing? How are people reacting to it?
Yeah, so that one has not gone live yet. So we were like in the middle of bringing that up with them, getting on a plane in like a couple hours to go do that. But it's also less of a that pilot is less of a business validation pilot. It's more of a like technology validation and city relationship validation. So people want it, like nobody wants to be the first one to do it. Right. They want to see somebody do it. So that one we've really focused on let's prove that we can do it, and then let's go to the next ones and make them like super viable.
Yeah. But breaking it apart each, right? Because you have the that first leg of delivery, getting it out of the Wendy's into the parking lot, and then right in this use case that you're describing with the portals, it could be a customer that's driving up to the portals to grab their package, but it could be a DoorDash driver as well, or eventually could be a drone or whatever picking it up there, bringing it to the house. In theory, right at the last mile. On the other end, you're building out the in-home delivery network for new construction developments. And then the vision is that eventually they'll connect with those long tubes, right, that are citywide.
Yeah. And there's a few different ways it looks. And so like kind of the thing I want to emphasize on this too is like, this is such a hard, messy, if you will, business that I don't think there's like a clear, this is the one way that does it. It requires a lot of flexibility on the go-to-market and the tech to kind of like go the path that the water flows. We're definitely pushing for different kinds of installs like citywide. But we have like kind of the insight we want to get to, and we have the tools to do it. It's just kind of a matter of like the relationships and the business development and the projects that come about that get us there.
Yeah. It's super cool to be going on a path with such ambitious, vision and long-term horizons. How do you do that day to day, just from a founder perspective, keep yourself motivated because, you're not able to ship product to customers that quickly compared to, let's say, a software startup or whatever you want to see that end state. But also as it relates to investors, you guys raised venture capital. You're going to need more venture, right? You're going to need a raise. And how do you pitch that where the returns are going to take a while?
Yeah, usually we get people who our investors are all super bought into the long-term vision. They understand that, there's some kind of generational companies that just take a decade or two to build. We're really ambitious though in the timelines because fundamentally we've taken autonomous delivery from a tech problem and turned it into a financial problem. Self-driving cars and drones are very difficult technically. You have to worry about the FAA and the certifications, but like the reliability that you have because there's a safety element where you're like interacting with people in the public. We're totally different. Our robots are really dumb. They're very simple. There's a lot of like difficulty in creating, like they're not easy to create, but they're not hard like in the same way a drone is. They're hard in the sense of like we have to make them last a really long time and work really well and be really reliable, but also be cost effective to produce. So everything we do, we design for mass manufacturing. We don't like everything is sheet metal. Everything is made to be scaled. So we kind of view our ramp up a lot differently than like, some of the deeper tech companies, because it's like, we know how much the pipe costs, if you're working with a great partner, they know how much volume they're going to be sending through it. So it's a pretty easy financial equation. Then you just have to get that pipe financed and do a longer term loan and pay it off.
So you mentioned drones. They've been promised for a while as that solution for last mile delivery. I know that there's been pilots, there are some active pilots, but it's still not widespread. Do you see this as replacing the need for drones? Will underground delivery coexist with drones for that last mile? What do you think?
I think it'll coexist. There's definitely things holding back that industry, regulation being a large one of them. And they're great companies that are doing really good work there. And we like our internal view is that drones are going to happen at some point. Where drones break down is how you get, or not where they break down, just one of the difficult problems with them is like, how do you get the worker in that Wendy's to load that drone? And how do you get them to do it safely? And like, how do you do it without them having a ton of technical knowledge? When you work closely with these QSRs, they care so much about operational efficiency. Like it was a huge thing figuring out where exactly we wanted to put this portal inside the store just so that it's operationally like right where they want it to be. And so our view on drones is we have this first inch product that is essentially like wiring up a store for autonomous delivery, because either it's going to be us taking it to the end, or it's going to be us handing off to another modality that's going to take it to the end. But at the end of the day, that store just has to interface with us. And if they can do that and do that scalably, pre-drone scaling, we're in a really good spot to be sort of like the USB port for autonomous delivery. So I think drones might become a possibility or like might be a thing. And when they do, and if they do, we're there ready for it. We will work closely with them to just like, and they don't have to worry about interfacing with all these stores. They just work with us. We develop that kind of handoff protocol, and then they can do their thing and the store can do theirs.
So once you get the product outside of the building through Pipedream, any modality has access to it at that point.
Yep. And then it's just basically changing what that portal, what that end node looks like. But we view it as like we kind of have this like node capture strategy. Like the more nodes we have, the more physical places we wire up for autonomous delivery, the larger the wedge we have kind of in the future autonomous delivery market.
Cool. We have a thing about defining acronyms here. You said QSR. Is that quick serve restaurant? Is that what it is? Okay.
Quick service restaurants.
What about the parallels between what you're doing and Elon Musk's Boring Company? I'm sure you've heard that many times before. First thing that comes to mind when you talk about, digging holes underground and moving things through it. How is it different technologically, and where do you think that plays into the future of logistics and transport?
Yeah, Boring Company is so interesting because, they are this like huge high profile company doing underground stuff, but polar opposite in terms of what they're doing. So Boring Company is innovating on the actual tunnel digging method, specifically with these really large diameter, like 12-meter tunnels. We take the opposite approach. We say we do not want to innovate on construction, at least to begin with. We want this to be a system that's viable with current methods. So every time we're doing a pilot, every time we're doing an install in a location, we know that there are at least 5 contractors we can call up in that area that could come and install our system. We'll have to help, some pointed stuff, but like,
because your pipes are a standard issue.
They've just done this stuff. It's not really that big of a deal. Whereas Boring is like they're creating this whole new machine. They're doing these things. We're very much a tech company, not a construction company.
Yeah. What about with regards to just transportation, they're using tracks as well, right? They're not doing anything with like, well, maybe you can tell me if they are, with regards to like how the cars move through their tunnels, right? Is it using pneumatic, like air pressure type stuff to move things faster? Is it just using tracks and wheels? Is it electromagnetic? How are they transporting things? Do you know?
I think their product works in a few different ways. So some, like I think in the Vegas case, it's just like kind of like a track, but it's more like a concrete, like very well defined road for the tires. But I know that they're also kind of thinking about Hyperloop long term, and I think that I really love their thesis of like being able to essentially create new roads without taking up land on the surface, because like traffic is absolutely a problem. There is space underground for things, and kind of when I think about our product and interfacing with the city, one of the things cities like about us is that we're taking traffic off the roads. Mm-hmm. It's like you're turning this like giant 2-ton vehicle that's carrying a burrito into this tiny little robot that's invisible underground in this small 18-inch pipe. So it's like I really love this idea of taking traffic off the surface and just putting it underground.
Yeah, it's ridiculous if you think about the fact that our roads these days you have these 2-ton metal machines with a human delivering a small bag of burritos.
Yeah,
instead of the other way around.
And it's crazy because it's like the value of that service is super high. I DoorDash stuff all the time. I love being able to just get my stuff delivered to me instantly. But, I don't think that it's the most optimal solution. I think there's room, but it's just, autonomous delivery has just had so many setbacks and just there's so many hurdles to overcome. I think that this kind of new angle we're taking could really like push ahead and make a lot of ground.
Yeah. I think that until we have in-home replicators where you can just print on demand that burrito, I think that innovating on the delivery method is necessary, and what you guys are doing is fascinating in that space. You mentioned Hyperloop. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm so naive and I don't know much, but my basic understanding is that you like create a vacuum in these tubes and like bring the air resistance down to 0, and you can go super high speed, super energy efficient. But I don't know anything about it.
That's a future state.
Yeah.
Got it. The pipes, you mentioned that you're using standard pipes. Can you retrofit existing pipes? Because I know that there's, especially in older cities, there's a ton of underground, just no man's land, right? Things that have been laid for decades and decades that are not used. Can you retrofit any of that?
Yeah, we took a strategic step to separate the thing the robot drives on from the pipe. It's just the rail, and the rail is not affixed to the pipe for a very good reason. One, you can uninstall it if you ever need to. So if you ever need to pull the rail out and change it out, it's super easy to. But two, we can install that pretty much anywhere. So as long as there's a pipe that's larger than this sort of like 18-inch internal diameter, you could put this rail through it. Now, retrofitting comes with its own issues in terms of like cleanliness and like, is the route actually helpful? But like from a technical standpoint, we're super well set up for it.
Okay, cool. What about standards? You guys are creating not just a new company and a new technology, you're creating a new space, a new industry, and a new standard, right? I was listening to Ben Horowitz talk on a podcast, and he was talking about the early days of the internet and how we look back now and, it was inevitable that the internet became what it is, but it wasn't in the early 90s, right? It could have been a lot of different types of networks. We got lucky that we got a open network that became universal, as opposed to, if Microsoft had owned the network or Oracle or whoever. How do you think about standards in building this new technology so that, there's going to be competitors? I think there are already a couple of folks that are claiming similar things or building similar technologies. Are you working together with them or with industry bodies or regulatory bodies to create those standards?
The interesting thing about like laying actual pipes is where each competitor is different is basically the tunnel size and the pipe size. And with the pipe size is downstream of the target market. And so we're the only company right now that I know of that's like really targeted to go to the end home. And for that reason, we've sized down our pipes to 18 inches. Every other competitor is much larger. Will there be competitors that are close to our size as we become more successful? Absolutely. I'm sure. TBD on how the collaboration goes and how those plug in together. We've definitely taken the approach of like, this has to be an open network. We're not going to sign any exclusive deals with one grocer or one food service company. Like, it is made to be an open network that all these players can plug into. We also don't necessarily see ourselves owning all of the pipe and all the network. We just want to operate the robots. I think when you get into the world of like allowing other companies to operate robots in those pipes, you run into like the risk of it operationally failing. But I think there's other ways that you can standardize within the industry, particularly in the autonomous handoff. And so what we've really tried to push and are starting to spearhead is this effort to standardize this one container, kind of like a shipping container for individual orders that can be handed off between these autonomous modalities. So like, I think that's where a lot of the standardization will come in.
Yeah, a great example. Exactly what I was thinking of. The shipping container, some may argue, is the biggest revolution technologically of the last 100 years and would have facilitated because standardization allowed for all of that downstream commerce to happen in a much more efficient way.
Totally, yeah.
Okay. So you're not necessarily, you're certainly not competing against other modalities, and you're also open to potentially collaborating on whether it's the pipes themselves, the robots, TBD. Is that right?
In terms of collaborating with competitors?
Collaborating in a future where there will be multiple underground delivery systems, and it would be shameful if, as a consumer, you can only buy from a certain number of retailers because your zip code, right? Like I'm locked into Comcast, and that's my only choice, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what's been piped to my zip code, right? As opposed to an open network where everybody's is cross compatible and can work together.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. Purely from a technical standpoint, because I think ideologically we're super aligned with that. Operationally and technically, it gets hard just because the robots need to move at such high speeds and at such high density that it's like you don't want to introduce too much risk. But like, I think we're super aligned with like competing and giving consumers choice, because I think it's like our incentives are to drive down the price of delivery at the end of the day.
Yeah, but easier said than done, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned though not offering exclusives to some of the supply side partners, but going back to, you mentioned this as a financial problem, right? Mm-hmm. Who's going to pay for the pipes? Who's going to pay for the infrastructure? Who's going to put up that money? It's going to be difficult, in my mind, to get consumers to do that because they're reaping so little of the value, right? Yeah. Even the home builders, even though they're getting some of the value, I would see that most of the value gets accumulated at the top with the supply side, right? So could you do maybe not a full-on exclusive, but some sort of like preferential deal with, let's say, the local Amazon distribution center or Walmart or whoever. So they're going to finance it because they're getting preferential treatment. Maybe they get a 6-month head start or whatever it is, so that they finance it, and then other supply side partners can come onto the network. Is that a model you guys are looking at?
Yeah, I think where there's so many fun financial engineering things to do there that are beyond me, a simple mechanical engineer. I think where we would try to align things is more of like a leasing and ownership model. So we would want to incentivize partners to finance sections of pipe, but basically say, you guys get a percentage of the revenue of all deliveries that go through that because you put up that capital. So then it's a lot easier for them to do the equation of like, okay, well, if we're putting this much volume, we know that just pays back. But also if these other players come and put in volume, it just increases the money they're making off that pipe. That becomes an investment for them. So I think the real goal would be make the pipes this financial asset that's easy to invest in, similar to fiber, to where all these kinds of independent capital partners can go and invest and create these special vehicles and do whatever they need to do to create that pipe.
Okay. What about just capital partners? Have you found any investors who are thinking about this as a potential, just a direct investment to finance the construction, to finance the CapEx in order to build out that first network?
Yeah, we've definitely had some conversations. Can't get into it, but yeah.
Got it. Okay. More TBD. What's been the biggest change in your thinking since you started? You've been at this for what, 3-4 years?
About 2.
Okay, 2 years.
Yeah. So I'm on the technical side, so it changes some things, but we always approach this as creating as modular and easy to just creating the most modular and easy to install network as possible. There's definitely been a change in balance of where we put the complexity of the network. So we've got a competitor in the UK called Magway, and they've taken this approach of turning the rail into essentially a long linear motor and having the robots kind of just be a cart with a magnet on it. They're very simple. There's not really any complexity in the robots, but all the complexities in the infrastructure. Our approach has been put zero complexity in the infrastructure, because that's the thing that the cost per foot of that infrastructure is the kind of the bounding metric for how quickly you can scale this, and put the complexity in the robots. Where we ended up landing was a little bit in between both, where we have this kind of dumb, unaffixed rail and pretty smart robots, but also pretty dumb, like not very complex. But there's definitely like more complexity into that network into the infrastructure than I expected. In terms of like as a business, how our thinking has changed, I definitely think we are. I don't know how much it's shifted. Like we've been pretty kind of keen on this sort of vision and direction, and just been plugging away at it. It's a pretty hard business to like build out because you don't know a lot of the requirements until you start working with the customers, but you can't really start working with the customers until you're far enough along to validate that you're real. So I would say we're kind of now at a phase in the company and this year really where we're working with customers enough to really flesh out the finalities of the network and the design. But yeah, I'd say it hasn't changed a ton. We've been kind of plugging away at it.
Okay, very cool. What about in your journey? You founded a couple of companies before this, a robotics company, I believe, that was acquired, and another company. Tell me about your journey, how that led you to where you are today and what you've learned as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've been doing robotics since I was like 14, and I've always wanted to be just the best roboticist I can be. And in college, I got introduced to entrepreneurship, and I dropped out and started a robotics company. And this robotics company was making this modular education platform to teach kids how to code and how to CAD and 3D print. But it was kind of like Lego in that it was all just this super modular system. And we got picked up by a large company, the largest company in that industry, because the education industry is not fun to sell to, especially selling hardware during COVID. But we had a good deal with them. And basically I got to join this company and redesign my entire product to be mass manufactured. And so I've kind of gotten to go through like 3 modular system developments from scratch in that process. And like creating a really good modular system is really hard because you basically have to push your modular rules to be as simple as possible. So for Lego, those modular rules are like the brick interface. You can always create all different kinds of bricks, but that interface stays the same. So coming into Pipedream, it really set me up to view the network that way. And to be really particular in the early days, we spent a good year and a half just getting those modular rules right. Because once you get those right, you're off to the races. You can develop so quickly and create such a great network. But if your rules are wrong, it becomes this like 5 to 10 year horrible decision. And I think that it just taught me coming into Pipedream that the best thing you can do developing a modular system is be very, very patient in the early days while you iterate on those modular rules. And we created a ton of prototypes. We create very quick prototypes, getting those modular rules just right, talking to customers, figuring out what the actual needs are, because we didn't know all the constraints when we started developing. But yeah, now we're at a point where those modular rules are really set in place, and we've got a lot of mechanical engineers who are just cranking away, making actual hardware for it.
Yeah. Most of the conversations that I've had on the podcast are with software founders, and, in software, you're thinking about backwards compatibility, maybe a couple of versions, but when you're talking about laying pipes, you have to think about what we're doing now. Totally. We're gonna have to live with that decision for 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah. You got to make sure future you doesn't hate current you too much.
Yeah. You guys have a fascinating rule as it comes to hiring. I heard Garrett talk about the idea that every new person has to be better than the last person that you hired. And you've managed to attract, some folks like, what's his name? Justin, co-founder at Drizzly, right? He doesn't need to work. He doesn't need to be here, but he's here because what? Because of culture, because of what you're building. How are you able to do that? And how do you maintain that?
I think we've hit a really special balance with this company. We are working on this really ambitious long-term goal, but there's a lot of short-term progress that can be made. And it's technically interesting, but not infeasible. And it's like, it's just a hard problem. And we kind of attract smart people who like hard, crazy problems. At the same time, there's this huge upside of if it works, it changes so much. And so I think it's the right intersection of feasible, but difficult and high upside that it just attracts these like crazy talented people.
Okay. And then once they're here, how do you keep them motivated? How do you keep yourself motivated with these massive long time horizons?
Yeah. There's so much to do on the day to day. We really are like, our team is very small relative to like what we've raised and what we're tackling. So there's a lot of work to do. So we don't really have any problem staying busy. And we stay kind of focused on like driven towards sort of the next pilots. So Justin's always working on relationships with new customers of different markets too. and kind of figuring out what are we going to do next. And engineering is kind of focused on like, all right, here's this next pilot. Here's the engineering we have to do to get there, and then doing that work. So it's pretty easy to stay motivated when there's so much work to do.
Yeah, sounds exciting. So aside from the Wendy's pilot, which is massive in its potential and just the name recognition of who you're working with, any other exciting stuff you're working on that you can share?
None that I can announce. We have a few more restaurant partners that we're working with, and some exciting like master plan development and even some citywide developments that we're working with. But this is one of those. I can't share too much.
Oh, man. But I was hoping you were going to slip up there.
The stuff that's coming is exciting for sure.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see that. We're nearing the end of our time, and I just really appreciate you spending the time today. I know that you are off to one of the test sites right after this, so thank you for squeezing me in here.
Absolutely.
We typically close out with a lightning round. Sound good?
Yeah, hit me.
So what's one book, newsletter, or podcast that you find yourself recommending most often?
Acquired.
Okay.
Great podcast. And then I love to read the books they recommend. They've got great books.
Yep. Any specific episodes recently? I'm a big fan of theirs. So anyone that you liked especially?
They did the retail series really well. Walmart, Amazon, and they're doing Costco right now, or just at Costco. And those are really fascinating. The retail industry is just super fascinating.
The Costco one it opened my mind in so many ways. Even though I've been in retail, I worked at Home Depot after the company I was with was acquired by them. But that episode was fascinating. I love what they're doing. So
yeah, I'm not finished yet, so don't spoil it.
No. Good recommendation there. What about productivity? How do you stay productive? You got a lot on your plate. Any hacks or tips that you swear by?
I wish I did have any. I'm an obsessive builder, and so I personally like to work late at night and just kind of do my CAD mode then. But I'm not a huge productivity hacker. I'm more of a just kind of do the work in front of you, and I couldn't not do the work if I wanted to most of the time.
That's a good one. Okay. What would you change about the startup world? If you could change anything about the venture-backed startup landscape?
Yeah. I think seeing more investment in hardware and people tackling hard problems. There's like, we've been really fortunate to find a lot of great investors, but I know that like deep tech and hard tech, I feel really strongly about it being sort of like where a lot of the next large generational companies will come from. And so I think just broadening the ecosystem and investments in those sort of plays. And they're a lot different than a software company. It's both are hard in their own ways, but hardware has these like really hard challenges. And until you get more funding, it's like there's a lot of hardware companies that don't get started. Yeah.
Investors are generally wary of hardware.
Rightfully so. It's a hard industry.
Hardware is hard, right?
Hardware is so hard.
That's what they say. What's a common misconception that people have about you?
A lot of people think we are making tunnel digging robots. we don't do anything with that.
What about you personally?
Oh, me personally. I don't know. I don't know if I talk to that many people. I think that, in generally like a CTO, most of my day and most of my obsession is related to the tech. But I was CEO of my last company and did a lot of the sales, and I was selling to schools. So I was really having to navigate these like large, slow moving government organizations to sell them hardware, which is so hard to do. And so I am so passionate about business and product and distribution as something that is upstream of the tech. So really when I think about building a great product, I think first about the customer and first about the business. The tech you can always figure out, but those sort of like business related things are so key to getting a good product right.
Yeah. If you could have coffee with anybody, dead or alive, who would that be?
That's a great question. Sam Walton would be so interesting. Yeah, I'd love to talk to Sam Walton.
What would you chat with him about?
I think just retail. He's such a fascinating person. I went to college in Northwest Arkansas, so I kind of lived in Walmart world, and I read his book, and I think he shaped so much about how modern America interacts with physical goods, and like I think that things are going to continue to change, and I would love to hear his perspective on where stuff is at and where it's going to go.
What's a core value or principle that you live by or try to live by?
I think like there's just basically no scenarios where total honesty isn't the right move. So I think just being like high integrity, high honesty, it matters so much more than money or so much more than like any other thing. So I would say just like high trust, high honesty with your team and with everybody. It's super key.
Love that. Can you share something that you've learned recently unrelated to your work, just something you came across that interested you?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good question.
In the spirit of always learning, just add to my curiosity.
A lot of the stuff that I love to learn about is just like really niche mechanism design. I follow a ton of like Instagram and YouTube channels that are just like creating interesting hardware. There's like this YouTube channel I follow that's like, it's just this like really old mechanical engineering professor that just creates like a couple new CAD linkages and interesting mechanisms a week. I love watching those. It's all just like, yeah. I learn so much too as I go through the building process, and like I'm always learning new manufacturing methods and new sort of like techniques to achieve certain things.
Very cool. So going back to your mechanical engineering roots.
Yeah.
Like it. Cool. Anything else that you'd like to share that we didn't cover? Anything that you wish I would have asked?
Nothing to ask. Nothing that I wish you'd have asked. Only a plug. We're always looking for great people to join. So if you're an engineer or a former founder that would love to do growth or sales, like reach out to us. We're looking for great people to join the team.
Awesome. And would that be remote or in Austin or both?
In Austin. We do some remote, but it's only for like really, really, really special candidates and special cases. I think going forward, we kind of just want to do in Austin. Yeah. With hardware development, it's hard to do it remotely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. You know what? There are companies that you hear about and, they get hyped. And then there are companies that you see that there's something special going on there. And the way that people talk about Pipedream, in fact, there was I forgot who it was, recently posted on Twitter. You probably know the thread that I'm talking about. One of these, Twitter celebrities was posting about like who's doing something super interesting in the hardware space. And, I went there quickly to give you guys a plug, and immediately I saw like 10 answers to Pipedream. I'm like, I don't need to add anything here. Like everybody's plugging you guys. So you guys are doing something special here. And, the world is recognizing that. I can't wait to see what you come up with and where this leads.
Yeah, man, the support from Twitter has just been amazing. There's so many people in the ecosystem that have been so supportive from the early days when like this didn't make sense. This is a very contrarian thing. And the fun thing about being in the weeds and, working in the business every day is that what the public sees is sort of like 6 months behind from where we're at. And so I cannot wait for everybody to see what's coming up and where we're at as a business. And I think that I think we're going to do some really exciting things over the next year. So yeah, thank you so much for having
Absolutely. Me. If we live in a Jetsons future, Pipedream is going to be a big part of that.
I hope so. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. Thanks.